This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
You're now in the Essential Zone, where we seek to be informative, inspirational, enlightening, and dynamic. But more importantly, we seek to be fair and balanced. There comes a time when the game tolerates no spectators, only players. There comes a time when we must recognize that our individual aspirations shape our collective destiny. There comes a time when getting in the game, despite the risks, despite the challenges, regardless of the cost, is simply the right thing to do. There comes a time when we must find our hearts, find our soul, and pursue our purpose for the greater good of all, for country, for humanity. There comes a time when we must manifest our true greatness. Yes, there comes a time, and that time is now. So let's get down to the essentials. The essentials. Serious radio for serious people committed to advancing the national conversation. And good evening and welcome to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. I am Hubert Edwards and you're listening to The Essentials, The Reset. This evening we want to have another conversation. We have been having a number of conversations over the course of the week. I had the opportunity to sit in for Shivago Lang, and I also had the opportunity to sit in on the morning show, that's Guardian AM. And so we talked a lot about some social issues, mainly around marital rape and the decriminalization of prostitution as we currently know it. There were some linkages. We had an opportunity to speak with Pastor Dave Burrows, who had provided some feedback on that. And so here we are today, thinking about, well, where should we go? Should we go and deal with some economic issues, or should we deal with some additional social issues? And I believe that the environment is ripe for the latter. And there's a lots of things out there to be discussed. Food distribution, the role of NGOs, the extent to which you have controls in place for monies sent, monies not sent, monies not received, mistakes or oversight with accounting. There's a lot of issues, a lot of angles we could take those matters from. But having listened to the radio today, I listened to Juan McCartney, and he dealt with that comprehensively. I listened to Shivago Lang, and he did that comprehensively from a different perspective, certainly from his learned and experienced perspective as an individual who was in government. And so we'll leave that alone. What we want to talk about this evening with the persons out there, and we invite you to join us and chime in. And when you chime in, come ready for the conversation. Don't be shy. Don't come, saying, well, you don't want to talk to me or you don't want to hear me. No, let's have a real conversation. So this evening, I decided I am going to talk about social cohesion. Social cohesion. And the reason I am speaking, or I'm going to attempt to talk about this term, social cohesion, is largely because of all of the issues I just mentioned earlier. And because also the idea of social cohesion holds serious implication for growth and development. And I believe that the multiplicity of issues that we are faced with is kind of showing us a path, if you will, or at least putting a bright light on some of the areas that we may need to focus on just a little bit more, or maybe in some instances, a lot more. But this This desire for growth, this desire for development has to be one which walk hand in hand, step by step, side by side with social mobility. I think we are very familiar with the retort, the middle class is being destroyed. That's kind of one way of saying some aspects of the social fabric of the country is kind of in disarray. And the destruction is taking place, the way persons put it. I really don't do this. And it's not something that I hold strongly, but I understand when persons discuss it. But the destruction, as the persons enunciate it, is being caused by economic issues for the most part. And so we want to look at this idea of social cohesion and what type of information, what value it holds for our national discussions. As we discuss debt, as we discuss revenue, as we discuss growth, we discuss development and investment, as we discuss how we respond to crises, as we discuss the need for collaboration between government or the public sector and non-government organization or charities. As we discuss all of this, I think there's a crossroad. There's an important crossroad at which all these things meet. And that crossroad, in my mind, is this thing called social cohesion. And so you would ask, naturally, what exactly is this thing called social cohesion? What does this term mean? And so I've done a little bit of research, took some things from the internet, read a couple of articles, some scholarly papers, pull out some things. So, these are not necessarily my original thoughts, but I'll share them with you and kind of contextualize and give you some commentary from my perspective. So social cohesion refers to the strength of relationships and the sense of solidarity among members of a community. So let me say that again. It's a strength of relationships and a sense of solidarity among members of a community. One indicator of social cohesion is the amount of social capital that a community has. So it is saying here that there need to be strong relationships, or at least the strength of the relationships determine the level of social cohesion. So you could have strong social cohesion, you could have weak social cohesion, but there's always social cohesion. And it also speaks to the sense of solidarity, and we know this from the labor movement. They're always talking about solidarity and the coming together, the strength, the oneness. So the extent to which the community, the Bahamas, or whichever community that you are in, and you can take it from the perspective of a national community, or you can break it down to the place you live or to the family unit. That too is in some ways a community. So to what extent is there a solidarity, a oneness of mind, a oneness of movement, a oneness of direction? How well is that, or how bad is that, give an indication of what the social cohesion within that grouping is? The OECD Development Center says that a cohesive society is one which works towards the well-being of all its members, fight exclusion and marginalization, creates a sense of belonging, promotes trust, and offers its members the opportunity of upward social mobility. A lot there to be unpacked, but I want you to listen closely. And this coming from the OECD. These are individuals who do a lot of research. And if nothing else, the things that they say become kind of standards by which we judge the world. This is the kind of world we live in today. And so it is saying to you that if you are in a cohesive society, you will observe a working towards the well-being of all of its members, or for the most part, if we say that's absolutely not possible, but for most of the members. And we have talked about this many times here in terms of leadership, in terms of the effectiveness of governance, in terms of how individuals should interact with each other. You have heard me talk many, many times about the concept of Ubuntu. This is kind of what it is. Ubuntu, I think, underline a high level of cohesiveness, or at least it entertains, not that it always exists, but it entertains, the idea entertains the thought of a very cohesive, highly cohesive society. I don't know if you remember the story, or you are aware of the story, which is often told. I don't know if it's true or false, but the story is told of the individual who went to Africa to do his studies and invited some kids to have a race. And the winner of the race would get a bag of goodies, whether it's fruits or candies, I don't know what it is, but they would be rewarded. But his intention was to create a race in a competitive environment where only one person would win. When he would have lined up all of the kids and say, on your mark, get set, go, the kids all held hands and ran to the basket and shared the goods there. And he was kind of flabbergasted and asked, why did you do that? This don't make sense. You were supposed to race each other. And the response was, how can one of us be good when others are not? How can one of us be happy when others are sad? But the essence there is, I think the essence that I want to pull from that story is that in that moment, the characters in that story were thinking about the well-being of all. So you see immediately at the very essence of it, a high level of social cohesiveness. It fights exclusion. It's saying, hey, the basket is there. Why should we exclude some persons? Why should we create winners and losers for this prize? It fights against marginalization. So we don't see each other as lesser individuals. We don't push persons to the margin because, they may look different, talk different, maybe of different ethnic background or religious background, or have some sort of difference in philosophy. So marginalization for whatsoever reason, or just because, they come from the poor side of town, whatsoever it is, a cohesive society works against that thing. It creates a sense of belonging. So if you are a part of that community, whether it's a national community or a subset of that community, you feel like you belong. You are welcome. It's inclusive. The rituals, the norms, the values, the mores, you're comfortable with them. And even if you are slightly different in your expression of the culture, in your expression of whatsoever it is that you express, that society is conducive to including you, that community. So it fights against this whole idea of marginalization and then creates this sense of belonging. It promotes trust. So I trust you. I trust that you're going to do the right thing. I trust that when you say to me, this is our state of affairs, I believe you. When you say to me, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, I believe that you actually need it. When you say, well, here are the issues, here are the challenges that we face, I believe you. And so, the level of interaction acceptance is boosted by and undergirded by the trust which that type of an approach promotes. We've heard often of the distrust that exists, for example, between, say, the political class and the electorate, because from time to time there has been incongruence between what is said and what actually is. There have been incongruence in what has been promised and what is actually done. There has been incongruence in expectation and actual delivery, whether or not those expectations were reasonable or not. The incongruence caused there to be a breakdown in trust. But a cohesive society, obviously, the members, the players within that society would be sensitive to and aware of these issues, and therefore work, I think, in a very deliberate and intentional way to make sure that those are reduced as much as is possible. It offers its members the opportunity for upward social mobility. So in an environment where you can, regardless of who you are, integrate within the social fabric of the society, within the social fabric of the community, and to the extent that you rank these as you being on the lower rung of, whatsoever continuity you have in mind or you perceive or exists in reality, you have opportunities to move up that rung. So you have opportunities as an individual who can read and write, to go to school, to learn, and to become a doctor, a nurse, a plumber, or whatsoever it is. You can move into these various social segments. So I think it's important that we understand that an environment like this is going to be more conducive to national growth and economic development. There's no question about that. There's some things in this which I've just explained. The opportunities for upward and social mobility usually include educational opportunities. It usually include the opportunity to earn a living, to make a livelihood, to grow and develop yourself. And so that in part and parcel, contributes to the economic growth and development of the community in the first instance, or the grouping. And of course, it expands out and definitely will get to the place where it impacts the national level. We see some research around this, and this guy, Maxwell, says, social cohesion involves building shared values and communities of interpretation, reducing disparities in wealth and income, and generally enabling people to have a sense that they are engaged in a common enterprise, facing shared challenges, and that they are members of the same community. Now, let me draw your attention to a couple of things. Reducing disparity in wealth and income. You have heard it elsewhere says inequality of wealth. Or there is a circumstance where there is a widening between the haves and the have-nots. I'm sure you heard that. And this is pretty much what it is saying. So the disparity, that gulf between those who have a whole lot and those who have almost nothing, in a cohesive society, there is work, there is deliberate effort and building which goes towards breaking down these disparities. And then enabling individuals to have a sense that they're engaged in a common enterprise. And that common enterprise, from a national perspective, ought to be the idea that whatsoever it is that I am doing, whatsoever it is that you are doing, you could be doing multiple things, but whatsoever that is or those are, at the end of the day, they culminate into a common objective of, as they say here, a common enterprise. And that common enterprise in my mind, or at least the common enterprise that I want to conclude with you, is nation building. So we all should be engaged in this idea of nation building. Yes, you have to work. You have to buy your own clothes. You have to buy your own food. You have to go to school. You have to send your kids to school. You have to pay for your medical bill, and so on and so forth. From a personal perspective, that's exactly what you're doing. But when you zoom out and you consider how do you fit into the formula which equals country or nation, every single thing that you're doing for personal self is in fact contributing to national development. And as a result of that, for those who lead, for those who have the opportunity to influence and to direct and to suggest direction, they should be mindful and become aware of the need to build this cohesiveness and to create these bright lines or these guardrails towards that common enterprise of nation building. So the discussions, we often hear when an individual leaves the active arena of politics, we usually say that individual becomes a statesman. And he's expected to be stately, and he's expected to not be partisan in his utterance, and so on and so forth. And the expectation is that when that individual speaks or whatsoever that individual does, it brings people together and it points in a direction which is in the beneficial interests or the overall interests of the country at large. I think that type of an expectation is exactly what this is saying and what should be anticipated in my mind from all leaders at all points in time, whether they are actively in the arena or outside, whether it is in the political arena, in the commercial arena, in the business arena, in the social arena, regardless of where that is, the whole idea of us having a common enterprise, which is represented by nation building, and an awareness that that demands us to have a cohesive society, I think is important, fundamental. It also goes on to say that you get the sense that you're facing shared challenges. And I think this is important. During COVID, there was this meme that keeps going around, and it went around a couple of times, which says, and all of a sudden some people realize it. I don't know why they didn't realize it before. They say that we're all in the same storm, but we're on different boats, which is normally true. There are persons who are differently abled. There are persons who are differently empowered. There are persons who are differently wealthy or rich. Some people who are financially able, some individuals who are seriously financially challenged. So if you use each of those as a boat to represent a boat, then all of us are in different boats, really. But the commonality is that in this issue, in this fight for nation building, we face common challenges. Today in the Bahamas, we are fighting COVID. We are fighting high inflation. We are fighting a situation where the country has large, significant debt, and that is driving some of the issues on the ground. We are facing the possibility of seeing some of our brothers and sisters get pushed deeper into poverty. The extent to which we see these as shared challenges is the extent to which we are going to demonstrate and show a level of cohesiveness. But if each of us are in our own boats and say, my boat is bigger than yours, you have a little dinghy, I have a yacht, I have a ship, I have a cruise ship, and I'm cool, then obviously there's going to be disparity of views, and that level of cohesiveness is not going to translate into nation building. I want to share with you something else. I can't show you the picture, but I want you to imagine you have 3 gears. Like, you have a car, and you know how they represent gears. It's a circle with the jagged things going around it, right? And I think each of us know that a gear, when it's turned, it goes in a particular direction. So the way this wheel of social dynamics and economic growth, which impacts this idea of social cohesiveness, is depicted. You have one wheel, which is economic growth. You have another one, which is social cohesion. And then the third is social inequities. And it's depicted in the wheel of economic growth is going in one direction. The wheel or the gear, and they are all connected, right? Because when one gear moves, you use a smaller gear to move a bigger gear, or some way it works. Bigger gear to move a smaller gear. I am not mechanically inclined, but one moves the other. But in this depiction, the big gear of economic growth is connected to a smaller gear of social cohesion, which is in turn connected to a slightly smaller gear of social inequalities. And the interesting thing about it is that the big gear of economic growth is spinning clockwise. So it's moving from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock to 3 to 6 to 9, clockwise. The smaller gear of social cohesion is moving anti-clockwise, so it's going in the opposite direction. And then the gear of social inequalities is moving yet in the direction opposite to social cohesion. And what they're trying to depict here is the fact that if these things aren't working together, then obviously there's going to be a problem. When you have a vehicle or any type of a mechanic where the gears go opposite to the direction that they should go, eventually something is going to seize up. And so you find that the issue of social exclusion and discrimination comes into play because social cohesion is moving in the wrong direction. You have the issue of polarization. You have issues of diversity or maybe lack of diversity. And you have social conflict. These are things which come into play to adversely impact economic growth. And then you have horizontal and vertical inequities. So inequities across the line and inequities up and down. A cohesive society is both a means and an end for economic growth and development. If you think about this whole idea of creating a circle that keeps circling back on itself, just run your hand along a circle. And on that continuum is both economic growth and social cohesion. So a cohesive society is a means and also an end of economic growth, because one of the things I've discovered in doing this research is that the most cohesive societies in the world, as measured by these academics, are these societies which are developed economically. And we'll share some of that later. The opposite way of saying that is that some of the worst, the least cohesive society have serious economic problems. I went through one graph, one table, with an index measuring social cohesion. And at the bottom of that, the very, very last country on that was Venezuela. Now, if you know anything about Venezuela, certainly at the time when it was done, it was going through significant upheaval, the issue of government and legitimate government, persons fleeing from the country, all of that sort of thing. So just picture a state of almost anarchy. Interestingly, the one almost second to the bottom, well, right near to Venezuela, was Ukraine at the time. So it tells you that a country that has issues with its social cohesion will also have issues with its growth and development and economic growth and development. Why am I saying all of this? Why am I saying all of this? The research shows and states very clearly that usually emerging economies, of which the Bahamas is one, emerging economies usually display some level of underdeveloped or lack of social cohesion. And if you look around us today, some of the conversations that we're having, are really indicative of exactly that. Without saying what is wrong, what is right, who is wrong, who is right, at the end of the day, all parts, all segments of society have to come together, have to work together for the country to function, whether in normal times or in times of crisis. We need each other. The extent to which we do that and do that well in normal times and certainly in times of crisis is going to be defining of the level of success that we have. The extent to which we work together as a population, not defined by some polarized philosophical distinction or sides or tribe, the more cohesive we are, the more productive the country is going to be. And so we have to and we must pay attention to these things. Because as we discuss the whole recovery and get into resilience, which can be drilled down very easily into hard economic dollar terms, oftentimes we miss the social or some of the softer things which are in fact enablers and facilitators of the more harder things that we seek to achieve. As a matter of fact, without some of the soft cohesion, the social interaction, the coming together, the meeting of the minds, oftentimes the hard economic dollar thing just simply will not happen. When you look at some countries, and the Bahamas fortunately doesn't have this type of a problem, but it's the easiest way for me to explain this is, let's take a country that has reasonable diversity in ethnic background. And these different ethnic groups are really not working with each other. Sometimes they're at war. You have almost a civil war. So persons are fighting, they're rival and riot, and buildings get burned, and there's lots of persons get killed, and there's upheaval all the time. Typically, you find a country like that, or an environment or a society like that, to be poor, not well off, to struggle, because they can't come together at the point where they need to make decisions even at the highest level. These differences become pronounced. We have differences, yes, in the Bahamas, but they are less pronounced than some of these things that we're talking about. There are differences in political view, there are differences in religious views, there are differences in how we should transact, or we should create and implement economic policies and other policies. There are those differences, but they're not as broad and bright and dividing as in the case of sometimes ethnic differences. And so let's take another country, and this is a real country now, not just one off the top of my head, but let's take a country like Singapore that has real ethnic diversity. You have Malay and Chinese and the other people and the people from the other place, lots of different ethnic groups, or at least a couple of different ethnic groups that makes up a significant portion of the population. Then you have persons who are groupings which are largely Christian, and persons who are agnostics, and persons who believe in Buddhism, and so on and so forth. And that very, very diverse society has shown and demonstrated, even though they have some practices which we would be challenged with on this side of the world, but they have shown the extent to which you can take diverse views, diverse background, diverse races, diverse religion, and pull together to create a cohesive society. And that cohesiveness, the effort to do that, builds a platform on which economic, strength is built. Because Singapore, by any one of these measures you use these days, is really at the top of developed countries. Small Singapore. I know we quote it often and it almost become cliche, but from this perspective, it's different. Think about it. Absolutely very, very diverse society, which in fact suffered some of these same things I'm talking about in its early history when it moved away from the UK, when it was no longer a colony of the UK. It grappled with some of these. These guys were actually fighting Malay versus Chinese and so on and so forth. The leadership back then, Lee Kuan Yew and co., made a deliberate effort, and if you read his book, Third to First World, where he clearly explained that one of the things that they knew that they had to do was to figure out a way of how all of these persons could live together. Cohesion. What lesson is in that for us? What lesson is in that for us on this side of the world? Whether it's the Bahamas, whether it's Jamaica or Barbados or any place else, Haiti certainly for sure have some level of upheaval, which we certainly could apply this to. But what is the lesson? The lesson is when you build a society based on cohesiveness, based on a sense of common enterprise, based on inclusion, work hard to break down the barriers of marginalization and, putting persons in categories outside of the norms, disparity in wealth, income inequality. When the work goes in, and I'm not saying you suddenly evaporate poor people, because that is not going to happen. That's not what I'm saying. But when an individual feels that they have the ability to put in good work and get reasonable and commensurate pay, and they then have the ability to work hard and apply themselves and move up that social ladder, however they view that and however they wish to transact that, it becomes a fundamental difference in my mind. So why is there a need? What might be one of the important points at which we need to have a high level of social cohesion? So it's no sense, I think I already made the argument of its value to economic growth or economic development. And that's in and of itself a big reason. But what else might there be? And what other reason which is proximate to this point in which we are discussing right here, right now, or other reasons which are very proximate to where we are now, that you would proffer to say there is a need or there is value in engendering and curating and nurturing social cohesion? What would you say? Our numbers are 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. The text line is 422-4796. If you want to be in on this conversation, and I entreat you to do so, then certainly I would love to get a call from you. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, I'm going to get into some of those other reasons, very proximate reasons. Then I want to share some other things on this idea of social cohesion and how valuable it is. Or at least I want you to start to consider what I am convinced of its value and the extent to which, if we understand and we become aware of the underlying principles, how might that be of good capital for the Bahamas as it seeks to grow, to develop, to recover, and to serve the greater good of all Bahamians. You're listening to The Essentials, The Reset. Don't move. Come right back.
So essential, so serious. Time for the essential.
Around the world, Cleveland Clinic is recognized as a leader in healthcare. Our team of experts relentlessly pursues the best for our patients. From groundbreaking cancer research to state-of-the-art heart surgery, life-saving innovations happen here every day. When it's time to travel for your health, it's time to travel to Cleveland Clinic. Your destination for care, for every care in the world. To learn more, visit clevelandclinic.org/Caribbean.
The new Guardian Radio app is here. Listen live to all our Guardian Radio shows and live video stream select programs in our studio. Get information about Guardian Radio shows and our hosts. Send messages, including text, email, and even call. All from our amazing new Guardian Radio app. Download it free today in your App Store for your Apple device or Play Store for your Android device. The all-new and improved Guardian Radio app.
For the best jerk in the Bahamas, you must have Baloo's. Pork, fish, and chicken served with our delicious country-style sauce and authentic festivals. Baloo's, Nassau East South. Call or WhatsApp 376-8951. Baloo's, the jerk with the soul of reggae and the spirit of Junkanoo. Baloo's jerk, traditional, slow-cooked to perfection. 376-8951. Get yours today.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
You know it's so essential, so serious. Time for the essentials.
And welcome back to the Essentials, the Reset. We've been having this discussion on social cohesion. Inviting you to join me if you want to give an input. If not, sit back, relax, and we'll talk about it. The need for social cohesion becomes very, very clear. And the awareness thereof become clearer when we are going through either a crisis or opportunities present themselves. So you could have a change in circumstances of a country or a community, which is defined by economic performance. So, country could be going nice and good, and then all of a sudden you drop off the chart like we experienced during COVID. Or we could be going through a crisis like we had with Dorian or we had with COVID again. So on one hand, for COVID, it was the financial side, but there's also the health aspect of it. Or there could be an opportunity where the Bahamas has this chance of galvanizing its people, or at least a subset thereof, to get into a new industry, to expand the old industry, to make some innovative things. Today we had the Bahamas, the Grand Bahama Business Outlook, and there was some interesting things being discussed there. And so it may be that these new ideas, these new things which have been discussed, may be a test of the level of cohesion which is resident in, say, the Grand Bahama community. And how that community responds to these opportunities will give an idea as to, what is possible. Ultimately, if it's an opportunity, it will help to define the extent to which we are able to maximize that, because there is cohesion, because we can help persons to move in direction. So you have leadership, which helps to steer persons in a direction that, we have this opportunity. Let's come together. We have a common enterprise. We're working towards the building of, say, 8 Mile Rock, and then we're going to build up Grand Bahama, and we're going to include Freeport. But guess what? Doing that is also going to be fundamental to the growth and development of the overall Bahamas. And because we're Bahamian, this is what we're doing, and the community comes together. Because in it, it's now a calling. I feel like I belong. This is a part of this. There is facilitation for growth and development. There is facilitation for breaking down the disparity, for me to earn more money, whatsoever however you want to interpret that. Or we could have a Dorian. And after Dorian, the conscience of the country obviously is going to be pierced. And the extent to which persons from all walks of life, government, NGOs, regular guy on the street, the private sector, the businessman, individuals who are ordinarily not seen as part of the society, but because they pass through from time to time and have some sort of affinity with the country, all galvanize in an almost spontaneous cohesion, a cohesive move, where individuals have to be moved from Abaco when they are coming into New Providence and the process is not working, and so persons drop all that they're doing and they spend hours and hours at the executive airport, and they're trying to, process individuals and make sure that they get food. And we have persons who are calling their friends in faraway lands, and persons are social cohesion, the extent to which minds can come together. That is important. And it is a test of the extent to which we can recover or we can grapple with or deal with these crises. So I'm saying to you, and this is very proximate to where we are. We just experienced Dorian. We are experiencing COVID now at a different level, but certainly we went through that with the health crisis. We remember, for those of us who went to get vaccinated, our individuals from Rotary and other service clubs were there at their own risk too, at their own personal risk, and they were helping to make these things run smoothly. This is what social cohesion is about. And what was the impact? Because today we can boast that maybe 40+% of the population has been vaccinated, and that has and translate into economic value. That translate into a message which is good for the Bahamas in terms of its tourism product and the ability to open back commerce, all of that else. But that came through volunteer work. Persons who gave up their time and their effort to do that. And this happened, over and repeatedly in normal and abnormal times. But it is the extent to which you have the social cohesion which makes that better. So to the extent that it is not there, then we can make an argument that what if we were better at it? How much more could we achieve? Social cohesion is an important determinant of a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous nation. You hear that? Peaceful, democratic, and prosperous. We don't have to worry too much about the peaceful and the democratic. To a large extent, our democracy is right there. But prosperous, there's always room to discuss that. It creates stronger bonds within and across different groups and foster greater trust in institutions of government. Yeah, social cohesion. Social cohesion is a very important driver of long-term prosperity and competitiveness. Cohesive societies are politically stable and focus on economic growth and business development. Social cohesion itself is built over years, not overnight. It results from policies that allow everybody in society to share in its prosperity. I mean, to say everybody is kind of a stretch, but that would be the objective. It makes competitiveness sustainable. So not that you're just going to be a flash in the pan and you achieve a level of national competency, a national capability, but that can be sustained because you can't keep the people, you can't keep the minds, you can't keep the thinking going in the same direction for long enough to make sure that that sustained, it becomes well developed, it becomes endemic in the community, in the broader country. But when we can do that, and what this is saying is that social cohesion helps you. Think about it this way. You and your friends are in a particular place, 10 of you, and 5 of you suddenly decide, well, we ain't cool with the other 5 no more. So there's a split. But there's a need to do a particular thing which requires 10. And so it turns out that neither of the 2 groups have the ability to do that thing. None. So nobody achieves anything. But then you look around and you say, as you being the conscience of the group, you say, this don't make no sense. Let me do something. Let me go and broker some sort of reconciliation here. And so you start having some conversation and say, look, guys, if we do this together, we're going to be better off. If we do this together, each of us will have some more. If we do this together, tomorrow we are going to be in a better position to make one more step up that social ladder. If we all move in the same direction over the long haul and we keep going in this direction and we keep focused, then prosperity may be down the road for us. And everybody look around and say, you make sense. Normally you don't, but this time you do. Let's do it. And so the thing which requires those 10 persons as a starting point now gets done and you start to move forward. This is the power of, I think, where leadership meets this idea of social cohesion. Recognizing and having the awareness that to engender the coming together of different groups, regardless of what the divide may be, it's philosophical, physical, features, race, whatsoever it is. The coming together, the bringing together, the working to keep together, the engendering of this commonality of movement for these persons, recognizing that, it terminates into a better us. A better you, a better me, a better country, a better community, a better society. And as the piece I just read indicate, that this is not simply looking at things from a, kind of like, purely social impact, friend to friend, because it talks about political stability. It talks about the focus on economic growth, the focus on business development. It talks about how you deal with policies. So clearly, it impacts governance. It would at least be an input. Thinking about what you want to achieve in this direction then becomes an input into policy development, which ultimately affects the way the country is run. And these policies may range anywhere from economic all the way down to social. Again. So, for example, during the COVID crisis, and this kind of closed the circle on this whole discussion around feeding people, a policy position was taken by the then administration that, look, it's going to be important to feed people. It's a policy position. And everything else, whether we agree with it now or there are things to be reconciled or there are things which went wrong and need to be fixed and persons need to be brought to account, regardless of what emanates from that, that policy permeated the country at that point in time. And that policy could be looked at through the lens of, hey, we are a society, we are our brother's keeper. Maybe it wasn't put in these same words, but if we don't feed people, then people are going to suffer. Persons may die, but you may have other impact. Persons may start to thief in other people's things and breaking into shops and social unrest. So the opposite of that type of behavior leading or tending towards anarchy would be to do certain things which creates a more cohesive, organized, and more cultured and peaceful environment. So it's not just, personal relationships. It's really something which operates or ought to operate at national level. It's something which political leadership should be taken into consideration. National leadership should be taken into consideration. It's things which corporate leadership should be taken into consideration and actually does in many ways. The political leadership do too. When we hear about discussions around social corporate responsibility, that's kind of what this is, Respect for the community, respect for the environment, issues of sustainability. These are things which build a cohesive community and bring together all parts dependent, we are out there hustling and we're doing it for ourselves because we want to make money. The companies are doing the same. We are going to work. That guy is making something and it has some hazardous waste, but we as a community create standards which says this is the way you should deal with this. So it's important. It's important that we do that. So what causes social cohesion? Social cohesion is strengthened by the progress a society has made towards a knowledge economy and its level of economic affluence. The part on the knowledge economy may take a little bit of a stretch to kind of wrap your mind around, but it's easy to make the argument that in a society which is dirt poor, people running up and down ragged, don't have no food, don't have no clothes, don't know where the next dollar is coming from, then social cohesion is not likely to be very evident. It's easy to understand that. So believe when they say that the level of economic affluence is important. And so it becomes almost a cycle which can either be virtuous or vicious. Because where you have social cohesion, it leads to economic growth and development and certainly economic affluence. When you don't, it turns out the other way around and leads to decadence and poverty and suffering and burden. And so it's an important aspect. We're experiencing it here in the Bahamas to a large extent. But I guarantee you that there are aspects of it that we can work on better and squeeze out greater value for the country. So what are some of the indicators? What are some of the indicators that would demonstrate that, there is social cohesion? And what are some of these indicators which would then point to us and say to us, hey, maybe we are on the path to, at least maintaining some level of affluence as the Bahamas has done over a long time, but still have the capacity to do more if certain things were at a higher level. So these, the social indicators, the indicators are plenty, but they can be kind of grouped into one, belonging. To what extent as a community, a lot of the people, most of the people feel like they belong. I would say just from observation, stick your hand in your mouth, hold it up to the wind in the Bahamas, you're going to get a very high percentage. Worth. How worthy, how worthwhile persons feel within the Bahamas, I think on balance, it's going to be high. Certainly we have some challenge pockets. We have some individuals who are struggling, who are vulnerable, and so on and so forth. That happens everywhere. But I think by and large, you would find that that is so. Social justice. I think there's room for discussion on this. There's room for discussion around issues of gender equality, and we talked this week about issues that kind of spill over into the marital rape and how we have gender violence and all of this sort of stuff. Access to the court, some persons may be challenged because they can't afford it. So, but generally speaking, there is evidence of social justice within the Bahamas. Does it need to be improved? I would think so. Can it be better? I would think so. If it then gets better and it's an indicator of social cohesion, does that mean that the Bahamas would be, all things being equal, in a better position, moving in the direction of creating greater affluence, breaking down disparity, breaking down exclusiveness, to become more inclusive, to deal with the income or wealth disparity and income inequality? Of course. Because all of this have part and parcel of the impact. Participation. Whether it's participation from a political point of view, where you get involved in voting, the Bahamas usually have a high participation in that, active participation. But by and large, persons are free to do what they want to do in many areas and actually do. Could there be more? Yes. Could the participation be more potent, be more pointed, be more strategic in certain areas? Definitely. And if you accept the argument that this is an input towards economic growth, or at least coming together and a harnessing of greater potential, then certainly it works in that direction. And what about acceptance, which is the final one? Acceptance. How accepted do you feel? By and large, I think most people would. But I'm sure that there are persons out there who feel left out. There are communities out there who sometimes don't feel that they're 100% integrated into the Bahamian society. There are small pockets of individuals who grumble from time to time and say, you left me out. And this have nothing to do with different ethnic groups, right? It may be because of socioeconomic standards. It may be because of the community in which you live, your locality. It may be because you are living in a family island which is remote and you don't have all of the wherewithal which is available in New Providence. These are things which persons may say, I know I'm a part of this. I feel really, really strongly, but there's some things which are missing. The issue is, if these things were there in a more pronounced way, how much more effective we would be, or we could be. How much more could we optimize whatsoever performance we have been realizing over the years, and certainly realizing at this point in time and need to realize going forward. Social cohesion is primarily a social phenomenon of relations between societal actors and institutions. It therefore requires prudent policies which ensure that economic development is inclusive and that it translates into changes of social and societal realities that strengthen social bonds. Yeah. It's not just a thing in and of itself. It's not just limited to the relationships at the personal level, but it rises to the point where it calls for, it demands prudent policies. So that is at the governance level. And it's demanding these prudent policies to ensure, policies to ensure economic development. You see where we're going with this? All wrapped up, bits and pieces, tied up in kind of the same fabric, part and parcel of the same cloth. But that economic development, it says, must be inclusive. And it must then translate into changes in societal realities. So the poor must get better. And I would say changes, not just changes, but positive changes. So the poor people must get better. The individuals who are in the middle class must have the ability to move up to the other class, and the other grouping and persons need to be able to expand themselves and grow and develop and get to the place where they're actualizing at the highest level. And so they feel a part. And the level of cohesion increases, and the level of national development improves, or at least has an environment, a better environment in which to improve. So I think while you have not been jumping in on the conversation, I think we've done a reasonable job to outline why this is important. And so from a practical perspective, it is that we need to be measured. We need to be mindful. We need to understand that all sectors, all people, all strata, all groupings have to be part and parcel of this thrust for national growth and development. And the glue that brings that all together in a consistent way is this idea of social cohesion. And I really believe that while we certainly don't hear this term often, it's not something that I have spoken about often. I was just sitting down and reflecting on some of the conversations, some of the news items, some of the things which were coming out, and it hit me that, hey, these things are happening at the crossroads, at the intersection of this idea of us working together peacefully, working together collaboratively, working together in unison with a common objective. And then I went and did some work. And it pops out. It's social cohesion. That's exactly what it is. So as we navigate these conversations, as we navigate these different challenges, as we work to engage ourselves as we ought to be, even though it may look like we're pursuing our own private, personal, and selfish objectives. As we do all of that, it has to be in the direction of building communities, building the nation, and of course, a drive for economic growth and economic development. And both of them sit in the same lane, working on each other. One is the outcome of the other. One is input for the other. One facilitates the next. The other one then turn around and support the other. So they're part and parcel, inseparable, if you will. Social cohesion. Let's take a break here, and when we come back, I'm going to then take you through a little bit of a framework to kind of drive this home as to the value, the potential value of what we're discussing, the fact that we have it, but more of it would be of greater value, greater potency, greater utility for the Bahamas. You listen to The Essentials, The Reset. I'm your host, Hubert Edwards. Don't move. Come right back.
It's so essential, so serious. Time for the essentials.
Around the world, Cleveland Clinic is recognized as a leader in healthcare. Our team of experts relentlessly pursues the best for our patients. From groundbreaking cancer research to state-of-the-art heart surgery, life-saving innovations happen here every day. When it's time to travel for your health, it's time to travel to Cleveland Clinic. Your destination for care, for every care in the world. To learn more, visit clevelandclinic.org/Caribbean.
Transitioning to a healthy lifestyle can be difficult. At Fresh Market, we're making it easy to choose good-for-you foods with our endless selection of fresh produce and all-natural organic specialty products, moving you closer to your New Year's goals. So, if you're looking to shed a few pounds with the ketogenic or whole food diet, shift things completely with paleo or raw foods, or just simply eat healthier, Fresh Market is inviting you to feed your good. After all, what you eat is what you're made of.
For the best jerk in the Bahamas, you must have Baloo's. Pork, fish, and chicken served with our delicious country-style sauce and authentic festivals. Baloo's, Nassau East South. Call or WhatsApp 376-8951. Baloo's, the jerk with the soul of reggae and the spirit of Junkanoo. Baloo's jerk, traditional, slow-cooked to perfection. 376-8951. Get yours today.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
You know it's so essential, so serious. Time for these essentials.
And welcome back to the Essentials. We're having a discussion last couple of minutes here. We're having a discussion about social cohesion and the way that could impact us as a country or impact any society and help to foster and engender economic growth and development. A couple of texts here. Let me share with you. Growth success occurs quicker when a group of people come together and join forces, and that's unity. Saying that we often use no man is an island, no man stands alone. And that's really what this is. It's a recognition that we all need to come together, but more so, it's a recognition or an awareness to identify, to recognize the things which push us apart and work actively to make sure that we mend those fences and not to take these differences for granted. Because while some of these differences on one level is productive, highly productive, like for example, we always like to talk about politics. So political leadership, political parties are absolutely important for the type of democracy that we practice. It's very, very important. You look in the Constitution, it says party. And the party or the person who it's there. So the extent to which this is needed is critical. But because it is needed, you have supporters, and supporters have philosophical differences. And sometimes those differences become hardened, and over years, persons have different views which cannot find common ground. But leadership, especially when it emerges on the national scene, so it's no longer at party level, the awareness that these necessary separations, which are enablers at one level, have to be managed in the next instance at the next level, is important. Because that's the way you're going to create the social cohesion, or at least manage it and make sure that you have an optimal level. So this idea of social cohesion and economic development, I found this chart, and in the source, I'm missing the source, I'm sorry about that. Don't like to do this, but it's not my original ideas. So you have social cohesion sitting in this graph, and you have two type of actions which is taking place. One is a causal, something causing, a causal relationship, and the other one is a correlation. So decrease polarization there's a there's a correlation between decreased polarization of individuals and social cohesion. There is a correlation between policy reforms, social protection, taxation, gender equality, wealth, protection of wealth, wage equality between male and female. All of these things have a correlation, or there's a correlation between those things and social cohesion. There's a correlation between development outcomes and social cohesion. So the availability of jobs, the education, inequality, the ability to earn a living, to grow and develop, to move up the financial ladder, if you will. There's a correlation between that and social cohesion. There's also a correlation between institutions, the way they're managed and the way they, whatsoever service that they deliver, especially from a public perspective, but certainly I think it goes across the board into the private sector. But there's a causal impact between social cohesion and the reduced rent seeking or better provision of public goods. So if you are seeking to serve the country better or seeking to create a more cohesive environment, then obviously you are going to seek to provide public goods and services at a higher level, at a more effective level, which serve individuals. And you're also going to then work to reduce these rent-seeking actors. And rent-seeking actors are basically those individuals who seek to profit from not doing productive things, but to like lobby or to create a movement of wealth from one group into the next without actually exerting effort for it. In some instances, it could be a little bit of a corruption there, but not quite that. But it also happened through, misallocation of resources. So yes, a little bit in the gray area. So there is a causal relationship between the two. There's also a causal relationship between social cohesion and growth. Development outcomes of jobs, education, reduction of inequality, and so on and so forth, has a causal impact on growth also. I mean, it's natural. If there are more jobs, that means there's more development. If persons are better educated, then they have better capacity and capabilities. So the expectation is that there's going to be growth. But there's also a correlation between growth and development outcomes. So you want to have growth, and you want to have growth which is inclusive. There is a causal relationship between growth and policy reforms, the development of policy, the creation of policy. So here it is that we're saying, and also the institutions' impact on policy reform. So here what we're saying is basically that whether it is a bright causal relationship, that means it's cause and effect. You do this, you get that, or there is a correlation, because correlation doesn't always turn out to be so. If you move up, I may move down, but it have absolutely nothing to do with it. So correlation is not causation, but there is a relationship there. So what we're saying is that social cohesion have these interactions, whether it's causal or correlating with the growth and development. Government revenues, income inequality, national growth or national decline, all of these things are part and parcel of what social cohesion may enable. And I found this article from Javier Ibanez de Aldecoa Foster, F-U-S-T-R. He's an economist. He wrote this article on January 14, 2019. At least then that's when it was published. And its headline, Social Cohesion and Inclusive Growth Inseparable. Social cohesion and inclusive growth inseparable. This is where the rubber meets the road. We can talk all of the stuff about the community, doing it together, growing together, being cohesive. But at the end of the day, if the growth isn't inclusive, that means it hits the individual then it's not going to be effective. So if you do not have inclusive growth, if there are pockets of individuals who are left outside the moneyed arena, if there are individuals who are left outside or left off the gravy train usually have bad connotations, but who are left off the opportunities for resources, the opportunity for growth, the opportunity for development, if persons are left out of that, then something is going to go badly. So you need to have social cohesion, you need to have growth, and that growth needs to be inclusive. Just want to read a quick section here for you, which says, social cohesion and inclusive economic growth are two inseparable concepts that mutually feed back into each other. Therefore, in a country where growth is more inclusive, it is easier for social cohesion to increase. Similarly, it seems easier to implement measures that foster a more inclusive form of growth in a country with a higher level of social cohesion. Social cohesion, in the end, is one of the factors that allow economic growth to be inclusive. Nevertheless, the same relationship also applies in the opposite direction. So just as much as it is virtuous going in one direction, it can be vicious going in the opposite direction. So where you don't have that inclusiveness, then the growth then becomes a negative experience, an adventure into something which is not comfortable. So, from a big picture perspective, as we look and we think about, where we are going as a country and what we are doing and how we are going to develop, and you may hear different persons on talk shows and persons writing, and they're basically saying we have to do better, we have to look at crime, we have to look at this, we have to look at that. We are all talking about, in a way, how do we become more socially cohesive? And the evidence is clear. Those countries that have big social problems, big social upheavals, are the countries that suffer economically. Not every country which is totally rich is totally free or very peaceful, because they may have some outlier. They may have tons of oil or tons of gold or ton of diamonds or whatsoever natural resources that they may have. But by and large, on balance, we usually experience that there is an impact there. So we talked about the indicators before, the 5 categories of indicators, where you have personal satisfaction, social environment, there's trust, there's political participation, and also the levels of crime, just mentioned that. So these are the basis on which persons measure these things. So in this article, this economist was speaking about how they created this social cohesion index. And these are the things which went into it. Multiple factors, but they were boiled down on the 5 different categories: personal satisfaction, social environment, trust, political participation, and levels of crime. And when they did the analysis, here is what they found. One revealing conclusion is that the Nordic countries, I think those would be Norway, Iceland, them people up that side, the Nordic countries, which tend to have a high level of institutional quality, are at the top of the list. Emerging economies, whose institutions are less robust and consolidated, have the lowest level of social cohesion. So, whether you accept it or not, this is what they found. They found that the countries, like we always like to talk about them, the Finland and the Norway, who have everything right and everything going on for them, and sovereign wealth fund and this and that, those countries emerged as the better countries in terms of social cohesion. And if we look, like we know, because we talk about them often, if we look at their economic affluence, then the arguments which we have been making up to now kind of gel, because they are some of the most affluent people in the world. And certainly, if they don't have all of the money like some of the guys over in the desert, the type of quality of life which is demonstrated based on our research, based on what's recorded, based on the quality of the education system, the health system, so on and so forth, says to us that there's affluence at a level, and there has to be at least some level of correlation between that and the level of cohesion which is experienced in these various societies. So the Nordic countries come out on top, and the emerging economies like ours and some others, certainly the Bahamas would be in a better stead than most others, but come out at the lower side. So social cohesion is partly determined by the level of the development of each country's institution. We said that already. Just to give you an example, I get a feel of where this kind of worked out. Spain, for example, degree of social cohesion lies someplace in the middle of the ranking. So Spain is relatively highly developed, but sometimes them people get hot-headed and, you have big marches and stuff in the street. We have a caller on the line. We have only a couple of minutes. Go ahead quickly. You have about 60 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Edwards, I'd just like to push this in, right? I'm always objective and controversial, as I was following global agendas for about almost 30 years, right? So a question for you, and the intellectuals, right? And we know our history about every black man from north to south who opened his mouth and shout about freedom. Mm-hmm. What happened to them, right? And unification of Africa, right? You know what happened to them? Even right to the latest when Bob Marley sang the song Africans to Liberation Zimbabwe, right? From the speech that His Imperial Majesty wrote. Now, the question is, why haven't we seen a United States of Africa? And that's the big question for everybody. And it's very easy to answer.
Why?
And so, like I said, aphoristically, the bottom will have the most contention. Mm-hmm. And so this is all not perchance that we are the footstool, right? But it's all because of what they call colonialization. Mm-hmm. All right? And so the reason why, because I get angry sometimes when I see how we, in the inner city, respectively, on a global plantation, killing one another, black on black, right? Mm-hmm. And, I know my history. It's not a mystery to me. Mm-hmm. So, a level of consciousness is needed, even from people above me, but it's like we all run with our colonial ideals, and this is why they use these monopolistic wealth to gain foothold over us and pass all of these entities like the Council on Foreign Relations. And I could read a statement from James Warburg from 1950 about how the statement is this, New world order will be achieved by Congress, whether you like it or not.
We're running out of time, 52.
By Congress or consent from 1950 from inside the Committee on Foreign Relations. So if people was exposed to real history, then they'll know. But, then that will give us the more zeal to empower ourselves. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that we're not teaching history and eugenics to our people is frightening for me. And, I even see the difference with my little 6-year-old now from school being closed down for so long socially, and she's suffering from anxiety and all these different things. So, I see what the global concept is.
All right, man. Unfortunately, you called in too late, and would love to entertain you some more, but we're running clean out of time. So, there's some of that. We can explore that at another time, but certainly, just to give you context, I said Spain fall in the middle, and you then find countries like Germany with a high quality of government or systems of checks and balance like the United States have. They all serve as good practice, and they tend to be on the upper side of the scale. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all the time that we have. It's 8 o'clock evening. So I just wanted to say I hope you enjoyed this excursion through this idea of social cohesion. Certainly, I think it holds value for at least the way we formulate, the way we think about our public policy, the way we think about growth and development, and the need for the involvement and the inclusiveness of all persons within the society. So all that's left to say is do not allow your greatness to become a victim of your unwillingness to change. I want you to stay good, be good. COVID is not over, so continue to be safe. One love and Ubuntu. Good night.